Hi everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff and I'll be your host for the show. Before we get underway, I wanted to make an announcement. My good friend Danielle Stedman's going to be premiering her new Dogman related show tomorrow night, Saturday, June 25th at 10 p.m. Eastern on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and do a search for Dogman Diaries, you'll be able to listen to her new show. If you'll remember, Danielle was my guest on episode 83 of Dogman Encounters. Danielle, I wish you nothing but the best. Now let's bring on tonight's guest. Tonight's guest is Allie. Allie, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Vic. I sure appreciate it.
Thanks so much for being here. Allie, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Okay, well, my name is Allie, and I call it domestic engineer, which is actually a housewife. And I'm a real avid camper. I've hunted, and I love to fish and swim. Later on, you will find out why camping is no longer on my agenda. All of the others I still do. I am 46 years old, and I really was skeptic until I found out that Bigfoot and Dogman are actually real. Now, anyone that talks about them, I believe them.
Yeah, after your experiences, I can understand why you'd be a card-carrying believer now. What kind of interests did you have in cryptids like Bigfoot when you were growing up?
Oh, every book that I could find on Bigfoot I had. I remember whenever The Legend of Boggy Creek came out in the movie for here in Texarkana and part of Oklahoma, I would watch that all the time and see if I could pick up something, that I had not seen on the film or something like that. And as far as Dogmen, to me they were werewolves. And this is crazy, but I always wished that I could be a werewolf. I guess it's just childhood fantasies. And whenever I found out that werewolves were real, I'm like, no, I don't want to be one.
Yeah, I figured that would change your tune on that after that experience you had. Have you heard of anyone else having any encounters in the area where you had that first encounter?
There is one that I had. I didn't have the real experience at this time. We were living in a little community that is on an Indian reservation. The neighbor that I had, her sister, we would all go down to the creek every day in the summertime and swim, and go pick berries or whatever. And she went and she came and told my neighbor about what had happened, and I just so happened to be there. And she was talking about she had seen this little place called Flat Rock. Had pretty deep creek running through it, and then it went shallow, and we'd let the babies and stuff play in it. Well, in the one where you could dive in, she said that she saw this gray, smaller animal, she called it, and said that it was crouched down and was washing its face in that water. And she said when it stood up, she said it looked like it was about as tall as her. And she's like almost 5 foot. And said that it started running off to the north. I guess it had seen her and it had scared her. And that's the only one that I've really heard about. And I believe that might have been a Bigfoot.
She never gave you any description of what its face looked like to help you decide whether it was a Bigfoot or maybe a Dogman?
No, all she said was she seen it from the back, and when it stood up, it looked like her, the height. And she said that whenever it took off to the north, because she was coming in from the south, that its back was towards her.
Oh, okay, I see.
I asked her myself if she could tell me what it looked like. And that's what she told me. She only saw it from the back and squatting down, and she knew it was washing its face.
Oh, I see. Speaking of what happened to you when you were younger, when you were 13, one night a neighbor knocked on your door with some disturbing news. What did she have to say?
Oh my gosh. She came running over to our house, and she was banging on the door and knocking. This was about 11 o'clock at night. And me and my mother have not went to bed yet. We were night owls. There was a movie that we were getting ready to watch, Anyway, my mom opened the door, asked what was going on, and at that time we were having a feud between us. And she said, "There's a big monster on top of your house." My mom said, "You're just drunk. You don't know what you're talking about." And she goes, "No, look, look." And my mom went outside. Well, I wasn't going outside. And she kind of dragged me outside with her. We looked up there, and we didn't see anything. Mom said, "Well, what did it look like then?" And the neighbor said that it was big and tall and hairy, and it had red eyes. Mom said, "Well, what was it doing?" And she goes, "Well, when I saw it, whatever it was doing," she said, "I don't know, but it stopped and just stood there and looked at me. I know something had been going on because there's no trees around our house, and my mom and dad had to replace their shingles twice in 20 years on their roof." Anyway, back to the movie. It was going to have Dracula and a werewolf in it. Needless to say, we did not watch that movie.
I can't say I blame you. Was this a 2-story house or a single-story house?
A single. And it was a brick house and had the regular shingles on the top. No chimney. Thank goodness, because it probably crawled down that chimney. But no, all the houses were built the same. There's different floor plans, but it was all built the same. They were built by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So that's about all I can say about that.
How close were the houses together?
They were probably about 40 feet apart.
Not exactly right on top of each other, but not all that far apart at the same time.
Right.
When she's telling you about all of this, did she seem preoccupied, wanting to keep an eye out for something up there on the roof that might be reaching down to grab her? Or when she was talking to you about this, did she make it seem like it was currently on the roof?
She made it seem like it was currently on the roof, and whenever we opened the door, of course the screen opened outwards. She was standing as close as she could get to that door. And my mom had to push, and she seemed a little preoccupied about something. She stepped back against the house because we had a front porch on there, and she was talking from the side of the house. She wasn't talking from in front of the door like most people would. So I guess she thought that it was still there and it was going to grab her and take her off or whatever.
Ew. From where she was standing talking to you at that moment, was she far enough away from the roof line where something big up there wouldn't have been able to reach down and grab her?
Yes. She was far enough away from the edge that nothing would grab her.
Yeah, I was thinking it just wouldn't make sense if she was worried about some monstrous thing on the roof to be standing in front of the front door where it could easily come over and reach down and grab her. That just wouldn't make sense at all. But back to the whole camping thing, Allie. Did you take your kids camping often before that first encounter?
We went camping almost every weekend. When summer was out, we would go maybe a week, and we went up to 2 weeks at a time camping. So yeah, we were pretty avid campers.
It sure sounds like it. All right, Allie, let's talk about this first encounter you had. Please give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Okay. This happened about 2, maybe 3 years ago. We had went camping, and I had a boyfriend at the time, and his name was Ben. We had went to this little place up here on Keystone Lake, because I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We had went out, and we were going to, enjoy ourselves, and we were going to camp out there for a week. Well, we went and found a camping spot, and because it's usually the one that we always had. We always had this one certain camping spot that we went to. So we went and we pulled up the track, unloaded everything, got the tents out, and we were running a little late. So it was probably about 9 o'clock whenever I got dinner finished and got the kids in bed. Well, we also had 2 little baby puppies. They were at the age they could eat and drink on their own. And we had brought them with us. Whenever we all went to bed, the puppies went and slept with my daughter in her tent. The big tent was mine and Ben's. The middle tent was my daughter's. And the smaller tent was my twin boys. Well, we all went to bed and we were all pretty exhausted. My daughter, you could hear her snoring right away. I mean, she just went out when she laid down. My boys, they were talking and probably about 20 minutes, we kept hollering at him to go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep. Well, about 20 minutes later, we didn't hear any noise at all from them, so we knew they were asleep. Puppies were asleep. Ben and I had stayed up, and we were talking, amongst ourselves, whispering naturally. I would say probably about 30 minutes, 45 minutes after we had got the boys asleep, we started hearing this walking, and it was on the gravel that they put on the roads that you could go here to the campsite, or you can go here to the campsite. The actual road that led from the entrance of the campsite down to the lake was asphalt. So we knew they had to be on our side of the road, whatever it was. And we thought it was a deer at first, and he said, no, that's no deer. He said, it's walking too hard, and he said, it's two-legged. And so the fear started setting in on me. I was starting to get a little hyper and tingly feeling. He just went to the other side of him, and he pulled up his gun, which was a .30-30. He thought, well, if they come up here and they try to hurt us or anything, they're going to get surprised. Well, we just kept listening, and it started getting closer and closer, and then it would stop, and I don't know what it would do. But anyway, Ben, whenever it would stop, Ben would stand up on his knees, and he could see out of the tent mesh that was on top of the tent. So he would do that, and he bent back down, and I said, what is it? He goes, I don't know. I said, well, let me see. He goes, no, you don't want to see. I said, yeah, I do. He says, no. He says, you stay where you're at, and you stay as still as you can be. We hear the walking start again. Well, it's getting closer and closer. About that time, he jumped back down, and he said, just be as quiet and still as you can be. I said, what is it? He said, I'm not going to tell you. I said, okay. I said, is it a man? He goes, no, it's not a man. And that's when the fear really started setting in, because I thought to myself, well, the only other thing that it could be is, because, like I said, I was real interested in these werewolves and Draculas and everything like that whenever I was a child. First thing that popped to my mind was a werewolf. I was always watching movies that had werewolves in them and different scenarios where they would come out at and everything. It popped in my mind. There's this one movie, the werewolf come out of the woods at him, and it went to the house. And I'm like, oh, if it went to a house, it has no problem going to a tent. I really started getting nervous and jittery at this time. Well, I could hear that thing walking again. And this time when it stopped right behind our tent. And I started getting very, very upset and nervous, and my kids were in the other two tents, and we kind of made it like a horseshoe type thing around their tents because of the fire, and the way everything was positioned in the campsite. Well, I wanted the kids to where I could see them. After it stopped, it started again, within seconds, and it went on the other side of the Suburban that we were in. And you could hear it, the springs on the Suburban, and it happened twice. You could hear him pushing that Suburban, like, come out, I know where you are. The next thing we know, he's trying to open the door on the driver's side, it sounded like. Well, he quit because there was nobody in there, and he come around the front of the Suburban and stood right in front of our tent. The campfire was burning out, and we had this drop cord, which I should say drop light, but it's like a long cord with the light on the end of it, and we had that hanging up in the tree and had it on. The shadow from the light was hitting our tent, and he was standing there, and I sat there and I thought, oh my God, it is a werewolf. It's before I knew anything about being called Dogman or anything like that, actually. I went and I started getting nervous as all get out, and he was just standing there looking. You see him turning his head through the shadow. And about that time, I started trying to get up. Ben pushed me back down. He goes, what the heck are you doing? I said, I've got to go get the kids. He goes, no. He said, it's too close. He says, as long as they're asleep, maybe it won't hurt them. I said, no. I said, I know these things, and I said, I have got to go get my kids. And we were whispering. And this thing was probably about 15 foot away from the tent. He went and he covered my mouth and was like halfway laying on me, holding me down. And the tears just started rolling because we could see the shadow getting closer to the tent. And so I sat there and I closed my eyes. I didn't want to see it. And it started looking in our tent. Well, then he had laid down on top of me. Basically, he had pulled the sleeping bag over just as much as he could. And he said, be quiet, don't move. Don't move, don't move. I said, all right. I said, but what is it? What is it really? He goes, don't worry about it. About that time, that thing looked over in the tent. We were laying real still. Well, I opened my eyes, and I could see this thing looking in the tent. I knew he was probably about 7 foot tall because our tent was 6 foot in the center, and he was looking over in it, and he had to bend down, some. And, oh my God. He stood up and started walking towards the kids' tent. Next to our tent was my daughter. And my boys took up the tail end of the little horseshoe that we had made with the tent. And so I could hear him, and with that shadow I could see him, which way he was going. And pretty much what he was doing and where he was going to stop. Well, my daughter's tent was probably about, 4 foot high. And it was so hot that summer, we had decided to take the top of our tents off. And so it was just mesh, the tent mesh that allows air to come in and out. I knew if it stopped that tent, it was going to look in. And all I could think of was, oh, God, don't let her wake up. Don't let her wake up. Don't let them puppies wake up. And I was crying and bawling. And my boyfriend at the time, he was holding me down, and I was trying to get up and tell him that I had to go get my kids. And of course, he wasn't going to let me. He said, you have got to lay here. He said, if you go out there now, there's no telling what that thing will do to you. So I listened to him, and I stayed there. And like I said, all I could think of was, oh, God, please don't let him wake up. Please don't let him wake up. And Ben had set up again, and he was watching where it was going. I knew it was my daughter's tent. He said that it's just looking in. And I thought, oh my God. Well, I don't know how she was positioned or anything in the tent, or the little puppies. It just looked in for maybe 5 seconds, I would say. And it stood upright and started going to the next one. And that's where my twin boys were at. I thought, oh my God, please let him be asleep. Please don't wake up. Please don't wake up. Because they had a habit of staying up till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning in the summertime. And it was probably maybe 11:30, 11:45 when this all was happening. I said, I've got to get to my kids. He said, no. He said, he's all right now. He said, I don't know what he's doing. I really don't know what it is. And he said, whatever it is, he said, you have no idea what it could do to you if you go out there. So I sat there and I kind of raced up and I looked, and it was looking in my boys' tent. Well, apparently there wasn't anything in there that it was too interested in. And the tears were still streaming. At the time, whenever the thing had walked away from the car tent and went to my daughter's tent, Ben had started crying. So we're sitting there, tears are just rolling out of our eyes. Whenever I stood up and I peeked out the tent myself, it had left the boys' tent and had went over to where we had placed our food. And I thought, oh my God, thank God, he didn't do anything to them kids. Thank God there wasn't anything he was interested in. I asked Ben, I said, what is he doing now? He goes, I don't know, but I think he's interested in that food is what I think. Well, I kept watching, and I had really didn't have a description at the time as to how it looked or what it was. I could just barely see it. It was going through everything. It went through the bags that we had for our clothes. There was clothes strung everywhere. The food, whatever wasn't packaged, was strung everywhere. What was in the ice chest was out of the ice chest, and the ice chests were dumped upside down, ice everywhere. Our food, our drinks everywhere. I don't know exactly what it was looking for. Well, after he had dumped everything and threw everything everywhere, we started seeing it was walking off. And probably about 60, 70 yards from us was where another camper had parked. And they were in an RV type thing. They started walking towards their campsite. Well, I could see from the back of it what it looked like. And this thing, like I said before, it had to be 7, maybe 8 foot tall. From the back, you could see the muscles in the back, in the arms, in the legs. I could not see the actual front of him, but whenever he was walking, he turned his head to the left, like he was looking out at the lake. And I saw the side view of it. This thing had ears, like a dog's ears, but they were sticking straight up. He was hairy all over. It was either a dark gray or black, that from the light that I could see him through, he was like a medium gray. And whenever he was turned around, he had a stripe down his back. He looked like a skunk. He had this stripe down his back, a real dark black. And the rest of him was a little lighter than that. And you could tell that he was pretty strong, and there wouldn't be no way that a man could stand up to this thing. And I don't even know if this 30-30 that my boyfriend had at the time would be able to take it down. I mean, to take a deer down, no problem, because that's what I used to deer hunt. This thing went walking on the road and was starting towards the other campers. At that time, I thought, oh my God, because they had just went in their house, and I don't know if they were sitting there watching TV or what, but you could still hear the noise from their RV. And I'm like, oh my God, I hope it don't do anything. Well, I guess, like I said before, he wasn't interested in that either. He walked on the road, and you could hear this growl, crunch, crunch, crunch. The boat ramp was probably a mile away from where we were camping. It took Ben and I about 20, 25 minutes to walk from the boat ramp to where we were camping. And this thing took off. And I mean, it took off. It had bit down, and I mean, just literally took off. And it wasn't 2 minutes, because I had unzipped the tent and I was going after my kids. Like I said, it was about 2 minutes, and we heard this awful, loud, howl, screaming type noise coming from down at the boat ramp. And I thought, oh my God, thank God it's down there now. And I grabbed my kids out of the tent, grabbed the puppies. And at that time, Ben just grabbed his gun and his keys and said, let's go. So we took off and went home. We decided to come back the next day and get our stuff, what we could salvage and everything. And when we come back the next day, you could see there was dust in the area around our tent, around the front of our tent. At that time, you could see this thing had humongous feet, and at the end, you could see where, like, toenails, claws, or whatever, had made an imprint in the dust as well as, the rest of the footprint. And I thought, oh my God. Well, I looked around to see if there was any hair or anything, that I could pick off of there. And he didn't rub up against the tent. The tree where we had the drop light, I looked there, to see if there was anything. And we decided to look at the Suburban because, like I said, it was on the other side and it was trying to push it over or whatever it was trying to do and trying to open the door. Well, you could see where it had been pushing on the Suburban. There's a small dent where one of his, I'm going to call it hands, because that's what it looked like whenever I saw it walking away. I could see it was a little hunched over, and these arms were long. His hands, his fingers, and I'm going to say nails were long and practically hung past his knees. You could see the little dent there where one of his hands had been. You could see the length of everything from his hand because there was dust on the Suburban as well. We went and we salvaged everything. We were talking about it. And I looked at him and I said, that was a werewolf, wasn't it? He says, I believe it was. He said, I didn't want you seeing it. He said, because I know how you are. And he said, I didn't want you going to any kind of panic attack or anything when you seen this or seen it going towards the kid. I said, well, you didn't do a good enough job. I said, because I was doing the panic attack whenever it was going towards the kid. He said, I had to do it. He said, if I would have let you go, he says, I know you would have run out there right in front of that thing. He said, you would have had it killed all of us. I said, yeah, I know. And we continued to pick up everything. We got out of there. And that's about the last time me and my kids ever went camping. For the past 2-3 years, we have not been out there on the lake. We have not been out camping. I would love to go again, but I'm afraid that something like that will happen again. I believe that was one of the scariest moments I have ever had in my life. I know if the kids would have seen it, woke up or anything, there was no way any of us would have made it out there. If it wouldn't have been for Ben holding me down and telling me to shut up and be quiet, I believe that, again, there was no way that we were going to get out there. He went back out there a couple of times, looking around, and he went and he asked the camp director, which lived up there by the entrance of the campsite, if he had heard anything or seen anything, the whole time that he had been there. And at that time, he said that sometimes there is this kind of a growl sound. He said sometimes there would be something that would hit his trailer on the back side of the trailer, which would be on the west side of his trailer. And he said that's all that he had experienced. He said that he never had seen anything. And he said that's the only thing that he had heard and the only thing that he could tell that physically had happened. So, Ben didn't tell him what had happened. I told my mom because she believes in these things. She gave me a hug and she said, you did very well. She said, by not getting up and going running to the kids. I said, Mom, he could have killed my kids. My mom said, well, you stayed there and you did what you could. I said, yeah, but if he would have come out there, I said, then it was right. He killed every one of us. I said, because if it went to either one of my kids and started tearing up the tents trying to get in or anything, I would have been out of that tent so fast. She looked at Ben and she said, I want to thank you. She said, you did a good job. Well, I could not tell my dad, could not tell my brother. And so it was just me and my mom talking about everything. And that's pretty much the story about the camping trip. Like I said, we've been wanting to go camping, but we've been holding ourselves off. And the kids keep telling me that they want to go camping and everything because they didn't see this. And I'm trying to tell them, no, she don't want to go camping. They got a little bit older, probably about a year, maybe last year. And I told them exactly what had happened at the campsite. Because now they're 16 and 19. The 16-year-old twins are like, oh, Mom, now you know he wasn't there. It was a bear. I said, no, it wasn't no bear. Because the campsite is located across the road from a game life refuge. And they first thought they had, bear. They argued with me, and I told them no. I said, I know what I saw. I said, so drop it. My daughter sat there, and she was always quiet when we talked to her and everything. And she sat there, and she took the Solly, and she just looked down and went to playing with her diary or whatever she had, magazine, or I forget what she had. And she didn't say a word. And I asked her if she had anything to say. She shook her head no. And I think she was in kind of a surprised state at that time. The boys were in denial. And Ben and I were still caught up not being able to go camping and stuff and what we had saw. We had no idea what it was. We did not want to see it again. So I have done everything that I could to keep from camping and going out there again, because like I said, I don't want to see it again. That was one of my scariest moments in my whole life.
Oh, I can understand why. That would shake anyone up, right down to their soul. How much grief has it caused you not being able to tell your dad about what happened?
Oh my gosh, it was a lot of grief because, I want to tell him, me and him were closer than me and my mom. And I could tell him anything that I thought. Well, my mom had told him about, when I was younger, about little spirits that she had seen in the house that we were living in at the time. And a light that would turn off and on by itself. And he was like, oh, it's just an electrical problem, and what you saw was just a dust storm type thing, that had happened in the house. He laid it off as that type of stuff. He was not interested in any type of ghosts, goblins, hobgoblins, or anything like that we would tell him about. So I decided I would not tell him about this. But yeah, it was very hard to not be able to tell him, but I knew that he would not believe it. So that's why I told my mom, and me and my mom sat down, and the talking that she did to me finally got me settled down about that night. But like I said, there's no way that we're going to go camping again. Not out there, at least.
Well, it sure is a shame you can't share that experience with your dad, but I'm so glad you at least had your mom there and she was open and receptive to listening to you share what happened that night.
Yeah, that was a very good thing.
Yeah, I'd say so. What effect did your kids' response to being told about what happened have on you?
Well, the boys still don't believe that that's what I saw. My daughter, she had taken it in and tossed it around in her mind. She knew that I would not tell her something that wasn't true about that. So I think she believes me, but she don't want to talk about it. My boys, they still say, here's the bear, here's the bear. And I said, no, it's not. I still don't think they believe that they're just playing it off.
I realize Ben's not your boyfriend now, but is he totally out of the picture where he can't corroborate your story so that the kids know that, yes, it was a Dogman?
Unfortunately, he passed away last July.
Oh.
And he had told them once, he had sat there whenever we were talking about it to the kids, and he sat there and he told the boys, he said, yes, that is exactly what we saw. Shelby was sitting in the front room, and like I said, she won't talk about it. The boys were sitting there at the kitchen table with us while we were talking to them, and they sit there and they put their heads down like, yeah, right. Well, Ben had told him, said, look at me. He said, I would not lie to you about something like this, and you know that. Well, after Ben and I had split up, we had got our own place. He would come over and visit, because, we were good friends at that time, after we had split up. the boys were there. Whenever they would come, he would come in the house, they would go out of the house because they didn't want to hear anything about the camping trip. They just don't want to bring it up anymore.
Well, don't feel too bad about that. Sometimes denial is the way that people deal with situations like that. We both know you saw what you saw, whether they believe it or not. Those boys are here today as a direct result of the way you reacted that night, you and Ben. So whether they believe that story about what happened on that camping trip or not, it's immaterial. It just doesn't matter. You know the truth, and that's all that matters. I know you didn't get the best look at that dog, man, but did at any time you get a chance to take a look at its legs?
Its leg, it looked like a human leg. It was real buff, and like I said, it just looked like a human leg. Down towards the, I call it ankle, it had like a protrusion where the bone or gristle or something, it was kind of like a dog's foot then, the way it was hooked onto the leg. How they had that little protrusion on the back, then it had just the foot, but that's all that I could see at that time, because like I said, it was walking away from us and was going out the side of the drop light.
Those protrusions you're talking about, those are called hocks. So it did have canine-style legs after all. Above the hocks, its legs looked human-like, but if it had hocks sticking out, it had canine-like legs then. Let's talk about that howl you heard, Allie. How far away was that boat ramp from you?
That boat ramp was probably about a mile from where we were camping, from the campsite that we were at. There were campsites all the way down to the boat ramp. And I remember there was some friends of Ben's that he had worked with, and they go catfishing at night so they can catch the big ones. And there were two boys of theirs that go what they call noodling, and that's where you stick your hand in the hole and you grab a catfish that's in there and pull it out. And you don't have a hook, you don't have fishing line, you just have your hand in there. Right before this thing howled, you could hear them down there, let's go, let's go, let's go. I have no idea what they saw, what happened or anything, but right after this thing howled, they went, and you could see them just charging out there in their car. I mean, they were going. That was the last time we saw them. Ben said that he talked to them and asked him what happened. They said the only thing that they knew was there was something big that was walking on the grass around their tent, and they could hear sticks breaking because there was a tree right there where their tent was. He said, well, we wasn't taking no chances on a bear being there. He said, if it was a bear, he said, we were gone. And so, like I say, he believes it was a bear, and we think that it was this thing that was at our campsite. But right before we saw them coming up the road, this thing howled. And the howl was so loud, it sounded like it was right there at our tent again. But it wasn't. And it was a longer howl than what a coyote or regular wolf would do. When it began, it was like a guttural growl, home type thing. Then it just led off into the actual howl that you would hear. At the time, Ben and I would walk up and down that road going from the campsite because we had camped there before. Like I said, we picked our same campsite every time that we went there. And we had always walked up and down that road from where our campsite was to the end of that road where the boat ramp started for exercise. And it was a mile. He fixed it with his truck at the time that he had and measured it, and it was a mile from boat ramp to where our campsite. And it took us probably 25 minutes to walk from the boat ramp to our campsite, the speed that we were walking. But like I said, whenever I saw it take off, he had bent down, and I cannot actually tell you if the front of him was on the ground. When this thing took off, I mean, it took off on that road. And I know it was going past the dust that it had kicked up off the gravel. I mean, I saw him bend down. I saw him take off. And I saw the gravel. Well, when I looked back, there was no seeing him. He had got down to that boat ramp and was doing his howl.
Being there in the moment, at any time, did you think it might have been another Dogman that you were listening to?
It could have been. It could have been calling this one down there, or down there letting it know where it was at, or whatever. But I really believe because of the guttural sound that it started with down there at the howl, because he was like doing his little guttural sound around the tents. And I don't want to say moaning or groaning, but it was, oh, I don't know how to explain it. It was like he was like a person would be groaning, trying to figure out something. And this thing, when it came up there was this strange sound. I cannot tell you what it was or anything, but it was going and it kept doing that until this thing went past our tent and went to the kids' tent. Like I say, I have no idea what it was, but anyway, the only thing that I saw at the campsite was this thing taking off. Going through our food, going through our clothes, and taking off. Didn't see it at the kids' tent because, like I said, Ben had been holding me down. But yeah, he could possibly have been another one down there calling this one. I believe that it was the same one that was at our campsite.
I sure hope that wasn't the case. Do you think that strange chuffing sound you just mentioned might have been the Dogman's feet on the gravel by your tent?
It possibly could have been. It possibly could have been because our tent was on the grassy area, and we always had these foam things, like the egg crate mattress type things. We would have them under our sleeping bags, just in case there was a rock or something under there, we wouldn't feel it. So, yeah, it possibly could have been, but we were right at the edge of where the grass ended and the gravel started because of the way that I had the tents positioned at that time.
Oh, okay, I see. Did you get the impression the Dogman approached your tent because it heard you and Ben whispering?
I believe it did. I believe it was going to the tents to try to find out where that whispering and moving around was coming from, what it was coming from. Because, like I said, it would bend over and look into the tents, and then all of a sudden it just stood up and walked away and went over to the picnic table. And I mean, it wreaked havoc on that picnic table.
It sure sounds like it. When it looked down into your tent through that vent, how much of its face were you able to see?
I opened my eyes and I was able to see its whole face.
What kind of details can you give us about what you saw when you looked up and saw that face?
Oh my God. Well, like I said before, it had the pointy ears and it had little strings of hair on the very point of the ears sticking up. It had a long nose. It did not look like it was extremely long. It looked like it was about a medium-sized nose, is what it looked like. The mouth, I can't tell you, he did not open his mouth at that time. It was closed. The eyes were amber. The hair around his neck and head was kind of puffed out. It actually looked like a German Shepherd type head. You know how they can puff out around the ears and the neck and the head. His hair was not very long around the facial area. That's about all I can remember. As soon as I saw it, I closed my eyes again.
Oh, I don't blame you there. I'm glad you did shut your eyes. Every once in a while, I'll have someone from Oklahoma ask me if I've heard of any encounters happening in that state. And all I can do is shake my head and tell them there are plenty of Dogman encounters being reported from Oklahoma.
Great.
All right, Allie, let's talk about this second encounter you had. Please tell us what happened that night.
This campsite that we were at is only 9 miles from where we lived. We moved because of this encounter that happened the second time. It was a school night, and it was like in, I want to say October, November. That's the time this happened, so it was cool. Well, I'm not going to say cool, it was cold. So I had put the kids to bed early, at their bedtime at, 10 o'clock. They all went to sleep, and the way my house was set up, you walk in the door, you walk right into the living room, off to your right is my room, go straight through to the dining room, off to the right is the pantry and my daughter's room, and the back door. I was on the left side of the house, and I had this little dog, and he was always jumping and trying to get on me, and everything. He was my little lap dog. He's my baby. And he would watch movies with me. He would literally watch movies with me. So we were going to watch this movie together. And I tell you what it was. It was American Werewolf in London. It had not started, it was just rolling previews of other movies. That's what it was showing. It had not shown any werewolf or anything like that. And I heard this noise outside. And the neighbor has this street light right in their backyard, and it lights up their whole backyard. Well, I went and I looked out of the window, and I see this thing standing in their backyard, and it was practically right underneath the light. And it was staring at their house. I can't really tell you exactly how tall it was, but I want to say 7 foot. And it was big, and it was hairy, and the fur or hair on it, whatever you want to call it, was gray. And this thing was kind of hunched over, and so I said the arms was extremely long, just like that one that was at the campsite. As soon as I saw it, my love seat was on that side, and that's what I was sitting on. As soon as I saw it, I shrunk down in that love seat and I covered my head up. And the only lights that were on in my house was the TV. And I thought, oh my God, I hope it don't come up here. The howling that we heard at the lake howled again. And it sounded like it was right at my door. And I thought, oh my God, please don't let me there, please don't let me there. And my little dog was whining and trying to get behind me, in between me and the lift seat. So whatever this thing was, my dog knew that it was trouble. And like I say, all I could do is swish, don't go here, don't go there. Needless to say, it did not come to my house. The house that we lived in was elevated pretty high. It was built to where a car could fit in the garage underneath the house. And it had like 14, 15 steps, like concrete steps, that it would come up, and right there was the door. Well, it had a wraparound porch. And so the porch was pretty high off the ground. I peeked out again, and this thing was gone. I went and I ran and I turned the TV off, and I started peeking out the windows. I could not see it anywhere. So I thought, oh, thank you, God. And that's all that I saw of that one.
Thank goodness. Did this second Dogman look like it might have been the same one you saw while camping?
Actually, from what I saw at the time, it could have been. But, like we were talking about, it could have also been maybe another one that, I don't want to say followed, because I don't think they could follow somebody from one place to another, but I think that they might be able to sense things that we can't. Just have extra senses that we don't have. That could lead them somewhere where they wanted to be. But, like I said, I didn't get a good enough look at it. It was underneath the street light next door in their backyard. And I just know what I saw, what it looked like from my window. I couldn't tell you really what the front of him looked like up close, because this one that looked over in my tent was only maybe 3 foot from me. And whenever I opened my eyes, I closed them real quick. As far as the walking away backwards, if I could have seen the back of him, I could have probably told you yes or no if it was the thing that was at the tent. But I did not see the back of him. All I saw was the front of him at that time in the backyard.
Under those conditions, I could understand why it'd be so hard to tell if it was the same one or not. What's the story behind these strange sounds you've been hearing around your house, Allie?
Oh, we had moved to this house that, that I was talking about, this elevated. And you could hear these things. We had a walnut tree in the backyard, so we just played it off as the walnut tree. Because you could hear these things banging on the wall in the back part of the house. And the front part of the house was windows that went from the top of the ceiling to the floor. Huge windows. And at that time, I did not have curtains on the windows or any kind of window cover. But I'm sure that if this thing would have, whatever it was, if it was throwing walnuts or if it was knocking itself or whatever, would have come around to those windows, the windows would have been broke if he had started knocking on them or throwing something at them or whatever. We would be able to see him, he'd be able to see us, and that would have been it, I believe. But you could hear things walking around the lower part of the house. He did not ever come up the stairs. But you could hear, like, twigs. You could hear them snapping. And that fall, you could hear the leaves rustling around when there was no wind. You could hear them rustling around like something was walking in them. And you could tell it wasn't no cat, it wasn't no dog. And I kept thinking, oh my God, it's somebody, they're going to break in here and take everything we got. So I had this little .22 pistol that Ben had given me. And I kept it on me at all times. Well, whenever it started banging on the back of the house and throwing whatever it was, we thought that it was actually walnuts falling off the tree and hitting the roof and falling down, or whatever, making a sound like that whenever it hit the roof. I got to thinking, well, no, because that's coming from the back of the house. It's not coming from the top of the house. But I would never say anything to the kids about that. And I immediately started thinking, just think whatever it is, whoever it is not coming around to the front of the house. What are they trying to do back there? Well, after 2 or 3 nights of this, we went outside in the daytime and got to looking, and there was like a little pile of rocks that was sitting there with walnuts also. And we looked, and there was this dead cat in the backyard. So we got rid of the dead cat and everything. And I got to thinking, what is this? Because the cat was not tore up by a dog. I don't know what it died from. I really don't know. I just know that whenever it started hitting the house, there was always something big that would hit the house and have like a bigger bang than whatever it was it had actually been throwing before.
When you saw that Dogman in your neighbor's backyard that night, were your windows open?
No. Thank God it wasn't, because we had closed them probably about 7 o'clock that night, because it started getting real chilly, because it was in fall time that I saw this. And it was probably maybe, let's see, it was in July, August, September, October, so maybe 3 or 4 months since we had been camping. That's the period it was between the time we were camping and this thing showed up at my neighbor's house.
Yeah, if it had only been 3 to 4 months since that first experience when you were camping, I can understand. Even if the weather was dreamy outside, I could understand why you wouldn't have the windows open. That does make good sense. You mentioned the howl the Dogman let out the second time around when it was standing in your neighbor's backyard. Did that cause your neighbors to come outside, take a look around, see what in the world was going on, what had made that sound?
Actually, I saw a couple of lights come on, one in the kitchen and actually one in their bathroom, because that's what was towards my side of the house and theirs. Other than that, I did not see anyone come out or anything. Their curtains were closed, so I couldn't tell you. All I know is I saw the light through the curtains that turned on, one in the kitchen and one in the bathroom.
Yeah, considering what you had been through at that point, I don't blame you for hunkering down and not looking outside all that much, any more than you had to at least.
Yeah, at that point, I didn't want to see nothing. I didn't want to hear nothing. No. Nope. I saw that thing standing there, and I was like, oh, my God, no, not again. What is happening? Why is this thing in city limits? We were located probably about 3 blocks from the main street of town. And I was thinking to myself for many days afterwards, how was it in town without anybody else seeing it? Why was it in town? I had no idea of what to think, what to do, what to say, and I sure as heck wasn't calling no police department and finding out if someone else had seen a werewolf or Dogman or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, that's an easy mistake to make. There are plenty of eyewitnesses who have seen these things inside cities like that. They don't only wind up getting seen out in the country, they do come into town sometimes.
Yep, I wish he wouldn't come into town that night.
Oh, I can understand that. Well, Allie, it's about time to get out of here. Do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
Yeah, I do. I've been listening to your radio talk show, and I know that there has been people on there that want to go and try to find these things and see what they are, see what they do, maybe even try to shoot them and bring them in. I want to say, do not do it. Do not do it. If you see a Dogman once in your life, you never want to see him again. Never. And you wish that you would never have seen it in the first place. There was one show that you had on, extremely upsetting, and it terrified me all the way down to my soul. At that time, the girl was young, maybe 13, 14 years old when this happened, and she had a friend with her. And I thought, oh my God, this thing is chasing them. How can they get away from them? And after I saw this Dogman at the lake and saw how it took off, that's all I could think about later on. And now, how could those girls have outrun this thing? It just terrified me. And all I'd say is, do not try to find these things. If they come up to you, I guess do as I did. Don't try to run in front of it and try to shoot it. I do not believe that there's a gun that would take this down. Teenagers, they want to go out and they want to try to find these things and they want to see what they look like and see if, I guess, they can get them or whatever. Don't do it, because if you go out there and you find one of these things and come face to face with it, you're not going home to see your mama. You're not going home to see your daddy. You said you've got siblings, you're not going to have home and see them again. I do not believe if you go out there and you find one of these Dogmen and it shows up and you're face to face with this thing, I do not believe that you're going to go back home. The men that think that they're going out there and shoot this thing, I don't believe that they'll come back home. I believe that if they feel like they're in danger, there's not one of them that's going to show up. There's going to be 2 or 3 of them that's going to show up, and they're going to ambush you. This is what I feel, and this is what I think. I don't know how it would happen. I don't know if anyone would believe me, but I sincerely believe if they feel threatened, there's going to be more than one. The only other thing I'd say is if these teenagers want to go out and they want to find this thing, kiss your mom and your daddy and your siblings goodbye, because I don't believe that you'll come back. Please do not go try to find this thing. Please do not give in to your desire to find one of these things. Because like I said, once you find one, you don't ever, ever, ever want to find another one.
Those are all really good words, Allie, and I couldn't agree more. Please don't go out trying to shoot one of these things. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Allie. I really do appreciate your time.
Thank you, Vic, and I really appreciate you having me on your show.
I'm so glad you came and did the show with us. Thanks again so much, and have a great night.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.